I'm Sari.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio. Welcome back to Seamwork Radio, everybody. So we're celebrating the second week of Design Your Wardrobe for this season. And if you're not familiar with Design Your Wardrobe, we've been talking about this for the last couple weeks, but Design Your Wardrobe is a 3-week interactive class that we have at Seamwork that helps you to plan a seasonal wardrobe that you can sew. So it's just a really fun process that you can go through with other people, and a huge number of people from our community participate in it. It's something that's free if you're a Seamwork member. So if you're interested, you can go to seamwork.com/wardrobe and learn more about it. But this week in Design Your Wardrobe, we're talking about color and print and how to create your own palette for the personal collection that you want to create through the Design Your Wardrobe process. So today on this episode, we wanted to talk about a few tips and tricks that we've used to get better at creating usable, inspiring palettes that really work for each of us. So let's start with our icebreaker for today, Haley. What's your favorite color to wear?
My favorite color to wear, it's probably blue, which is different from my actual favorite color, which is pink. What about you?
My favorite color to wear is probably, it's very boring. I want to say it's pink or blue because I do love those colors, but black is probably the color. Black or like a creamy white are probably the colors that I wear the most. I love black and white as kind of my base, and then everything else kind of gets layered in. So I don't know. I've worn a lot of black my whole adult and teenage also life, so especially teenage life.
It's classic. For me, it's a real feel-good color. I always feel good in black. And blue, some shades of it are definitely have that same feeling to me.
I love denim. I wear a lot of denim, so definitely I incorporate. And I like navy blue and like indigo blue and really all shades of blue. It makes me feel good, but I do wear a lot of black. If you were to look at my closet, at my wardrobe of clothing, you'd see a lot of black and a lot of cream. So
when I think of Sari colors, I definitely think of black and cream for sure.
They just make me feel good. I love the simplicity of them too. So we definitely want to hear what you guys think about this. What is your favorite color to wear? I'm also curious if it's different from just your favorite colors like it is for us. So if you want to answer that, you could leave a review for us and let us know, or you could @message us on Instagram @Seamwork and be sure to hashtag it Icebreakers for Makers and let us know. We'd love to hear from you.
I think it's really interesting to think about your taste in color, the colors you like looking at, and versus the colors you like to wear. For me, that's oftentimes really different. And I think that in addition to that, our taste in color and print really naturally change or maybe just evolve over time. Have you ever gone through any phases in your taste in color or print?
Oh, definitely. Well, like I said before, I wore a lot of black in high school and college, really. I wore a lot of black when I was younger, which I think is so interesting. A lot of kids go through that phase of all black. And I think a big part of that is, black has it conveys so many messages, I think. But I also think it conveys a message of safety. It's a very safe color in a lot of ways, and that if you can just wear all black all the time, and you've got an instant look if you're wearing all black. And I do think in some ways it's a very safe color, which is maybe one reason I still love it. That was definitely a phase. And then when I was in college, I definitely went through a blue phase where I was just obsessed with blue, really, really into blue. And I wore a lot of blue and a lot of black. And my hair was dyed blue at various times. And I wore blue makeup and just a lot of blue. And I don't know why, it was just a color that I fell in love with at that time and just became obsessed with. Maybe when you're younger, you just get obsessed with things more easily. I
think so. I think you're really seeking identity when you're younger. You're trying to start arranging the building blocks for the person that you are outside of your family. And so I think that especially when you're younger, you really go through these very distinct phases.
Do you have any phases like that you went through?
I've gone through actually kind of like various stages of wearing black in my life. I think it's something that I return to when I feel like I need that like safety. I think safe is a really good way of describing how I feel when I wear it. I also, when I would say in like early 2010s, I went through like a phase of just like, I really liked deep colors, like a lot of like deep blue, deep red, deep green, this almost like collegiate kind of color palette. But I'm, for the most part, over the last 5 years or so, have been pretty consistent in the colors that I like. I might lean more heavily towards one in 1 year or one chapter, but I've definitely kind of like settled on what works for me.
I think I feel pretty much the same way. I do see still some changes and phases that I go through. Like, I think I've been really into warm colors for a few years, and more recently I've found myself gravitating more towards blues and greens, and I think that has a lot to do with the environment I'm in and being more inspired by the outdoors lately, and water and plants, and that having an influence on my life. So it's interesting to see where these come from and how the influences change over time.
Do you have a person whose like sense of color that you really admire?
That's a great question. We talked about some of our icons in past episodes, and it's almost a sense of non-color, but we talked about Patti Smith as being one of my personal heroes. And, she wears and wore a lot of black and white. And I really admire the restraint and the sense of self that comes with that, with, really sticking to who you are visually as an artist. And I really admire that. So it's almost a sense of non-color. But there are a lot of people who dress very boldly in lots of great colors, and I admire that in a totally different way. So, but that's somebody who I think of as like really inspiring for me personally. What about you?
I kind of identify with that. I really admire people who have this like really distinct cohesion throughout their wardrobe and just in general, but in terms of color, someone who does a really good job with this is Sienna. She is our video expert here at Seamwork, and if you may know her on Instagram, is not a primary color, but she has such a distinct color palette that's so beautiful and works for her, and I love her sense of color.
She has a very defined sense of style and color.
Definitely. Shout out to Sienna. Hi, Sienna.
Hey, Sienna. So when we're talking about color, I think this is something that a lot of people, we've heard from a lot of people that they do kind of struggle with it a little bit because color is beautiful and it's hard to choose when there are so many beautiful colors in the world. So putting together a palette can be tough. So we wanted to talk a little bit about that and maybe some questions that you can ask yourself. I think one question that I think has been helpful for me is how much color or print do you really want in your wardrobe when you're thinking about, for yourself personally, when you're thinking about sewing specifically and creating your own clothing. And I think what this comes down to for me is how much do you value simplicity versus expressiveness through color? So for me, I really like a sense of simplicity. I really like a pared down aesthetic. I still have lots of color in my wardrobe, but it tends to be in a specific palette. And one of the reasons for that is that I think simplicity is something that just means a lot to me. And I think I really like expressing that value through a constrained palette. So not everybody feels that way. And some people really like to express themselves through color. And I think that's awesome too. But that's a question that you can ask yourself about where you fall on that spectrum. So that's one thing. And then print, I think people get hung up on quite a bit as well, because prints, obviously they can incorporate many colors. How do you really build a palette that incorporates prints as well? And I think it can be helpful to look at what categories of print you like the most and start there. So are you drawn to stripes? Are you drawn to plaids? Do you like really abstract patterns or dots or animal print or floral? And then once you kind of identify those things, those broader categories, you can drill down into the characteristics of those kinds of prints in more detail. Like for me, I do really like floral prints, but there are specific floral prints that I really like. I really like floral prints that have a lot of white space or negative space in them, but I also really like tiny, tiny little ditzy floral prints that are very romantic and soft. And so you can start with those big categories and then think about how you can define the characteristics within those categories. So that's something, I don't know. How do you feel about prints, Haley? Because I know this is something a lot of people struggle with when it comes to designing a palette.
They're one of those things that like I love prints, but I don't tend to gravitate towards them super heavily in my own wardrobe. I definitely find that I lean more into stripes in some cases, like a little bit of stripes. I don't like to go too stripe heavy. I definitely have gone through a stripes phase though. I like dots, smaller scale, and then like some floral here and there, but I tend to keep towards the classic prints. Those are the things that really work for me, and I find them to fit more have more longevity in my wardrobe. So I tend to kind of stick to those. If I get experimental with a print, I usually try to keep it something. I tend to like to do like dresses or like a jumpsuit or kind of like a one piece type outfit, because then I don't have to worry as much about the mixing and matching aspect. It's kind of a statement piece on its own. But when I go with my more classic prints, I definitely will do more separates.
That's a good point to make, that if you maybe are a little bit shy about prints or not sure how to incorporate them, that doing a one piece like a dress might be an easier way to incorporate them than trying to do a lot of printed separates than that you're trying to mix and match together.
Yeah, I think it's a better way to kind of audition them for your style. I'm a big like fan of like auditioning things in your life and seeing how they work.
I think it's a good tip for color too. You know, if there are bold colors that you want to incorporate, maybe it makes more sense to do it as something that you can wear on its own instead of, and maybe keep your separates into more mix and match colors, more neutral colors or colors that are easy to pair with other things.
Yeah, and if you find you're reaching for that more wild card color frequently, then find ways to incorporate it into your separates as well.
So another thing that you can do, think about what are your favorite, maybe one or two colors, and then build on those. So if those are things that you really love wearing, like I love wearing black and I love wearing white or cream, and maybe those are, you know, the colors I can start with and then build upon that to create your palette. So for those particular colors, I mean, they go with everything. So that's pretty easy. But if maybe blue is a color that you wear a lot, you wear lots of maybe denim or navy, then look at those and think about what colors you can incorporate that go well with that. You could use a color wheel to do this and find colors that are nearby on the color wheel. Or you can use, there are websites also that help you build a palette where you can put in colors and it'll generate some palette ideas for you. I think, I don't know if it's still around, but Adobe had one. They've probably rebranded. It was called Cooler with a K. They might have rebranded it by now, but if you look for Adobe color palettes, you might be able to find that. So that's one way you can go, is just start with a favorite color and build from there. And then another thing you could do is look at other people's palettes and look for combos that you might not have thought about before. So I think that's a really great way to get a little bit more creative with your palettes. If you feel a little bit stuck with your palettes, is to look at what other people have created. And, you know, another thing you could try, some people are into this, some people are not, but the idea of color seasons. I don't know if that is something that resonates with you, Haley, but, you know, I think it could be a good starting point. You know, I don't really buy entirely into the idea of like 4 seasons and finding, you know, what's flattering versus, you know, I think it's really important what you actually love and what you wear, and not just what is objectively quote unquote flattering on you. But it could be a good place to start. It could be a good place to explore, you know, what you feel good in. What do you think?
I definitely like prickle at flattering and that like concept in general. But sometimes I think it's just as valuable to like know what you don't like as it is to know what you do like. So for me, it always puts me into like, I don't know, like some like kind of like pastel-y color palette that usually doesn't resonate so much to me. I like pastels, but I like mixing them in more unexpected type ways. And so I don't like to feel like constrained by that, but it can be kind of a good way to like, oh, I like that color, but the rest, like, no, good exercise nonetheless.
And I think even if it doesn't resonate with you, like if it's, for example, pastels and that doesn't speak to you, it's still helpful to know that it doesn't speak to you. That maybe, your color seasons are supposed to be spring, but you just like to be in autumn. So be in autumn.
Yeah. You do you.
You can be in autumn if you want to be in autumn. So another thing that we touched on in previous episode, in the last episode, is looking at sources outside of fashion. So we were talking about creating mood boards. And I think that's another place that you can look for color inspiration, is just looking at art, design, graphic design, photography, nature. We talked about looking at landscapes for inspiration. Great sources of color inspiration. I know my garden is a big source of color inspiration for me. I grow a lot of roses and they come in these just amazing, amazing colors. And I find that really, really inspiring. And I do wear a lot of pink. That might be part of why I think my love of flowers probably plays into that. Although my new house has a lot of dahlias, so maybe I'll start wearing brighter colors. Who knows?
You can incorporate it in fun ways. Lipstick.
And that's kind of what we've been talking about is, things influence you as your life changes and being open to that. So that's a good source too of color inspiration. And then another thing you can do is choose maybe 3 to 5 core colors and neutrals, and then mix in some others with that. So if you want to mix in more statement-y colors, like we were saying earlier, maybe start with a more condensed palette of maybe up to 5 colors that you wear often that are easy to mix and match. Maybe incorporate some neutrals and have kind of a base palette, and then mix in others. And you can do that seasonally. So you could mix in maybe in the spring and summer, you want to mix in brighter pinks or cobalt blue or something that really speaks to you that particular season. And then maybe in the fall, your landscape changes around you and you're more inspired by rusty colors and those sorts of things, or maybe a bright chartreuse. And you could incorporate that on top of your base palette. So that's another really great way to create palettes. And I think that's something that Design Your Wardrobe really helps with, because you're creating a palette for the season and not for the rest of your life. And I think that's helpful. And then another thing that you could think about is the idea of contrast. So in addition to just thinking about color, contrast is a concept that is often used in menswear, I think, in the design of menswear, because menswear traditionally, not always, but traditionally has a more restrained color palette in the past. And so there's more reliance on contrast. So meaning if you have a lot of contrast in your skin and hair, for example, then wearing higher contrast tones can help bring that out and make you stand out, your face stand out more. So just thinking about things like that can be helpful if it's something that appeals to you. Again, there are no hard and fast rules, but these are things that you could just think about. And then another thing, Haley brought this up when we were discussing this earlier, and I think this is such a good point, which is that the context matters, because maybe there are some parts of your wardrobe where you feel completely different about color. And maybe, for example, your workout clothes or your pajamas are something that you don't care. You'll just wear any color that appeals to you and you don't have to worry about it fitting into some kind of a palette. I don't know. I feel that way. What do you think, Haley?
I go through phases for sure. I think with my athletic wear, I'm kind of like, whatever, anything goes, and just like let it be fun. With pajamas and loungewear, I used to have like a little bit more of an anything goes, but in recent years, I've definitely adopted a more restrained color palette with my pajamas and loungewear, because I just feel like it's a little bit more like, I don't like want all of the visual stimulation. I just want it to be like very like chill. But I think that it's great to like identify those places in your life where you can like, experiment a little bit, and you may through that experimentation, find something that you really like and you want to incorporate into other aspects of your wardrobe.
And then lastly is that you can just practice. You can make some color palettes just for fun and just get practice at using them. You could also create them for other purposes other than your wardrobe to get some practice. So maybe create a color palette for a garden that you're going to plant, or for your home or a room in your home, or for quilts or crafts, or, there are lots of ways to incorporate color in your life, and maybe practicing creating some palettes around that can help kind of get you in the groove and get you thinking about color in some different ways and how it applies to your life.
I love creating little color palettes all the time that I sometimes use or I don't use. I have kind of like a personal backlog of color palettes I'd like to explore personally or for a Seamwork photo shoot. And it's just like a good kind of like practice of getting out of your comfort zone and seeing beyond maybe the things you're typically attracted to. Because I think that sometimes we can get kind of stuck in a rut. And that's not to say that knowing your style or having a specific point of view isn't a good thing, but I like to make sure for myself that it's something that I'm doing intentionally and not something that I'm just doing it because it's like rote.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's good to check in with yourself about how you feel about the color in your life and whether it's bringing you joy or not. Maybe it is, and maybe it isn't.
To recap a little bit, we talked about color in print in this episode, which is very much inspired by this week's topic in Design Your Wardrobe. Again, if you are interested in Design Your Wardrobe, you can go to seamwork.com/wardrobe. This session has already started, but you can do a self-paced version of it at any point in the year if you are a Seamwork member. And so we shared some tips about exploring color palettes and building your own. Tip number 1 is to ask yourself a couple questions. How much color and print do you want in your life? Do you value simplicity or more expressiveness through color and print? And then identifying what kinds of prints you like the most, and then drilling a little deeper in identifying the characteristics that you like. Do you like large scale, small scale, lots of negative space, low contrast, high contrast? Really like get into the nitty gritty of what pleases you when it comes to print. Tip number 2 is to build upon your 1 to 2 favorite colors and then use the color wheel to your advantage to find the colors that are harmonious with that. Tip number 3 is to get inspired by other people's palettes or color palettes in general, digging into color seasons if that's something that interests you, or maybe look at them even if it doesn't interest you and identify what you don't like. Looking at sources outside of fashion, art, design, photography, and nature. Another great tool is to choose your 3 to 5 core colors and neutrals and then mix other kind of wild cards in seasonally. Think about color and contrast. If you like high contrast, low contrast, if that's not a thing for you, you can identify that as well. And then identify the places in your life where you can cut loose and play with things, whether that's in loungewear, activewear, really any place in your life that you feel free to explore. And then last but not least, practice. Practice makes perfect. So try making color palettes just for fun or for other uses like home decor or quilting or crafting or gardening. You're going to feel more confident in this skill and have more fun experimenting with it if you practice at it, just like with sewing. So if you want to learn more about this, definitely check out the August 2021 issue of Seamwork. It's all about color and print. You could also listen to the last 2 episodes of Seamwork Radio, where we talk about identifying your personal style and creating dynamic mood boards. Again, check out Design Your Wardrobe at seamwork.com/wardrobe. And you can also read about finding a wardrobe palette for you in an article from Seamwork, which we will link in the show notes. Lots of resources for diving into this topic a little bit more. And if you liked this episode, definitely leave us a review. It helps us to create more episodes that you will enjoy and helps other people to find us. So just leave us a review, and we love to read them. We always really appreciate them.
Yeah, we are so grateful for everybody who has left us a rating or a review. If you don't have time to leave a review, you can also just leave a rating, a star rating on Apple Podcasts or the platform of your choice, and that really helps too. It takes about a second, so we appreciate that as well.
Yes, thank you so much for all of those. Well, and that is all we have for this episode of Seamwork Radio.
All right, we will see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.
Seamwork Radio is brought to you by the team at Seamwork. Seamwork's an online community that supports you in creating a wardrobe that feels right for you. When you join us at Seamwork, you become part of our private community of makers, and you also get access to monthly sew-along classes, a library of over 200 sewing patterns, and tons of great resources to help guide you through the sewing adventure that you choose. Podcast listeners can get half off a Seamwork Unlimited membership, which means you can download as many of those 200 plus patterns as you want at any time, and our community will be there to guide and support you. If you'd like to join us for half off, just visit seamwork.com/go/podcast50. You can also find us on Instagram at Seamwork, or visit our YouTube channel, which is called Seamwork Video. We love hearing from you, so let us know if there's a topic or a personal story that you'd like us to cover. Thanks for listening to Seamwork Radio.